All right, it's time to learn about loops, code that lets us repeat a certain block of code over and over again. And just before we do that, I want to introduce or review a few operators that we can use elsewhere in our code, but they're really commonly used in loops. So for this, I'm just going to create a new project, a new Java file. So I'll go in here, new Java class. I'm going to call it more operators, and no space, and wait for that to open up, and public static void main. Okay, so now we have our main method, and now what I want to talk about here are just the increment operator, the very similar decrement operator, and third, the what are called the assignment operators. And so these are just shortcuts. They're not something that you have to use, but they're really commonly used, especially, like I said, in loops and a lot of other scenarios. They can save you from writing code, more typing, just make your code a little shorter, and it can also help prevent errors. So the most basic thing is that it's very common that we're going to have a variable, let's say int index, which we're going to use to keep track of when we're looping over a piece of code, we're repeating it over and over again, how many times we've done that. So usually we call it index, or just I for short is really common. Sometimes you can call it a counter, depending on what you're counting or how you want to name it. And so let's say we want to say each time we do run that code, we want to increase the amount of the counter from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. So the simplest way to do that would be index equals index plus 1. And that's gonna increase that. We can print that out. So now if we print out our index, let me run this. And so it's just building down here. And it's gonna print out the current value of our index, which right now should be 1 because we went from 0 to 1. Okay, and here we have it. Very dramatic result. We print out a 1 to the console. Now there's a shortcut that we could use for that. Instead of writing index equals index plus 1, I'm going to get rid of that space for now. We could just say index plus plus. And that's just a shortcut way of saying add 1 to the current value of that variable. And if you've heard of the language C++, that was kind of a play on words because it was taking the C language and instead of saying C 2.0, it's a similar way of saying that. It's like taking C to the next level. So that's why they call that C++. But so this is just a shortcut that you're going to see really, really often, and it's really useful in loops. And here I'll just print it again, just so we can see that now it should print out 1, and then it should print it out again as 2. There we have it. And so that's the increment operator. There's a similar decrement operator, which instead of saying if we want to make the index less by 1, we can say index minus minus. And that's going to just decrease the value by 1. Same idea, just a shortcut. You don't have to use it, but you're going to see it often, especially the increment is really common to use. Now, similar to how we have this kind of shortcut way of adding 1 to a variable, there's a bunch of other operators that are shortcuts for all the other arithmetic operators. So sometimes, let's say we have a variable called x, set that to 0. Now let's say we wanted to do some math to that, so we could say x equals x plus 2. So that's the regular way of doing that, and we'll print out x. But there's a shortcut where we could do both of those in one step, x plus equals 2. And that's going to increase x by 2 and then set it equal to that. So it's the same as saying x equals x plus 2, which is a shorter way of doing it. It saves you a little typing, and especially if you have long variable names, it's good to write descriptive names of variables, not just have x and y and stuff like that when it's not so easy to figure out what those variables stand for. So let's say you're going to have user post count or something like that as your variable. You don't want to type it twice. You might make a simple spelling error or forget to capitalize something, and it could just have every time you type a variable name, there's a chance you'll make an error, so it can help you reduce those errors. So yeah, so we can just do that for print out x here. You could do a similar thing, x minus equals 1. That will just reduce x by 1, and we can print out x again there. And we can do that for times. X times equals, let's do 3, and we can print it out. We can do, let's see, we could do x divided equals 2. So we're going to divide x by 2 and then set x equal to that new amount. Oops. And last, we have the modulus operator. We could say x equals modulus 5. So remember, that's going to take the divided by 5 and give us the remainder of that. So if we print all these out, if we run this, we'll get these all printed out to the console, and we can see what's going on. Okay, so here we have it. We started out x, oh no, this is still, okay, so we did 1. Oh, we didn't print that out, yeah. So then this is starting x is 2. Then we added 2 again. So let's see, x was x plus 2. Right, so we started as 2. Then it goes to 4. Then we subtract 1, it goes back to 3. We multiply by 3, it goes to 9. We divide it by 2, and so that rounds it, because we're doing integers, it rounds it to 4. And then 4 modulus 5 is still 4. So that's these basic operators. Just wanted to make sure you're aware of them. And you can use them if you find it easier. You should just know what they are for when you see them in your code, but you don't have to use them. It's just another way, a shortcut way of doing things.